Hey there, welcome to another edition of Ranting with Sea of Tranquility. I am your host, Pete Pardo from SOT. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. Today, I've got a little topic I want to kind of talk to you all about, something that's been kind of bugging me for years, and I figure what better outlet to kind of get it off my chest than here in front of you all. So thanks for stopping by and giving me a few minutes here. So today, the topic I want to talk about is kind of something that I've seen and heard throughout my life as a musical lover, and it's that whole kind of theme that a band, popular band, or what, it doesn't even have to be a popular band, rock, metal, prog, whatever, loses their singer. So that their classic singer, or their first singer or whatever, singer leaves the band, whether he gets kicked out, leaves by choice, or dies, right? And once that happens, fans and fellow people in the music industry are like, oh, they're done. They can't continue. That's it. Over. I'm of the opinion that the world's not going to end if the singer leaves, right? If the band continues to go on, there's lots of things that can happen. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world for the band or for the fans, right? So, but a lot of people don't think that way. A lot of people are like, oh, that's it, done. I don't think I could ever listen to them without that person singing. Me, I'm of the opinion that, well, let's wait and see what happens. I'm going to talk about a lot of examples here. But and a lot of the examples I'm going to talk about are bands, classic bands, more recent bands, legacy bands, who have had, very notable frontmen or front ladies leave the band. And, immediately upon that happening, most people were just kind of ready to give up on everything. I'm here to tell you it's not the case, and you shouldn't. All right, so I'm going to give you lots of reasons why. And you can disagree with me all you want about this. I've had people who I've gotten to long, drawn-out conversations with people about this topic, and not everybody agrees with my opinion here, and that's cool. You don't have to. But, again, it goes back to something I said on my last rant. It's like if you're a fan of the band, right, give them a chance. Okay, don't just cast aside saying, hey, it's done, just because the vocalists change. Okay, so anyway, so we're going to talk about a bunch of them. So I'm going to go way back in time. I'm going to start with one of my favorite bands. In fact, I'm going to start with my two favorite bands of all time, Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, because they're perfect examples of this whole kind of storyline here. So Black Sabbath, classic band, arguably the originators of heavy metal, right? They've got a frontman named Ozzy Osbourne who, he was the focal point. I mean, Ozzy's legendary, right? So 70s kind of start to peter out. The band is obviously, not getting along too well with Ozzy. He's, the whole band is strung out on drugs. Ozzy's, drinking and doing drugs and whatever, and just being a royal pain in the ass. And, musically things are not really clicking. And eventually they get tired of Ozzy's shit, and, out he goes. So end of the 70s, they released Never Say Die. He actually left before they did Never Say Die, came back and did the album. In my opinion, one of the worst albums Sabbath has done. Some good songs on there, but that's a story for another day. Never Say Die just doesn't do nearly as well as all the albums before it. They do a tour with Van Halen. Van Halen was up and coming. A lot of people say Van Halen kind of overstaged them on that entire tour. So eventually Ozzy is kicked to the curb, done. So, what's Sabbath going to do now, right? So what do? Sabbath goes out and gets Ronnie James Dio from Rainbow. He and Ritchie Blackmore had parted ways about a year or so before. So, why not? Fresh start. So in comes Dio. Wait a second. All the Ozzy fans are like, oh, who's this Dio guy? He sings about Dungeons and Dragons and rainbows and wizards and all that kind of stuff. That's not Black Sabbath. He's not Ozzy. Well, you know what? What do? They went out and put together arguably two of their strongest albums of their career, in Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, right? Yet, granted, very different from the Black Sabbath we knew and loved before then. But any fan of Sabbath, can you honestly tell me that Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules are worse than Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die? No, you can't. All right, at least I can't. In my opinion, those two albums are just as strong, although they're different, than all those classic early 5 or 6 first Sabbath albums with Ozzy. So again, the world didn't end. Took took the fans a little while to warm up to Ronnie in Sabbath, but by the end of that Heaven and Hell tour, which they did with Blue Oyster Cult, the Black and Blue tour, and certainly come Mob Rules time, I caught them on the Mob Rules tour. Man, the fans were totally into it. They had accepted, okay? They accepted Sabbath with Dio. All of a sudden, Dio is like this hot commodity, right? Well, problems happen. Dio and Vinny Appice, drummer, leave the band to form Dio, right? And of course, we know the story there. Ronnie goes off to, a lot of success with his solo band Dio. Into Sabbath comes Ian Gillan from Deep Purple and the Gillan band. That didn't last too long, but pretty cool. I thought anyway, because I'm a huge fan of both bands, so for me it was cool. Again, some people kind of like, I think by that point, the folks who were really, really into Dio, fronting Sabbath, now are like, oh, now we got to deal with this. And then, Gillan left, and then in comes Glenn Hughes, and then Tony Martin, so on and so forth. So it was kind of like this revolving door vocalist. But you know what? All very solid albums. Okay, even with all these vocalist changes, most Sabbath fans have a deep affection for the Tony Martin set of albums. And then, Ozzy wound up coming back years later. So, Dio also came back into the band a couple times. So, again, in the case of Black Sabbath, not the end of the world. Let's switch over to Deep Purple. So, we've got the Mark I era of the band. So, fronted by Rod Evans. We know that was formative years. Okay, very different band back then. But, eventually the band felt they needed someone different, more of a heavy rock style vocalist. So, in comes Ian Gillan in 1969, I believe. And for the In Rock album, and all of a sudden, wow, totally different band. Honestly, I don't think there's anybody who was crying over the fact that Gillan replaced Evans, right? So the band goes through a number of successful albums and tours and years with Gillan as the frontman. Of course, you all know he and Richie Blackmore just never saw eye to eye, and that eventually led to Gillan leaving the band along with Roger Glover. So in comes the unknown David Coverdale, as well as Glenn Hughes on second vocals and bass from Trapeze. And again, you have fans who are probably like, I can accept this band without Ian Gillan, but then all of a sudden you hear the Burn album, you're like, well, this is pretty fucking good. Again, a little different. Burn and Stormbringer, and Come Taste the Band, that's a separate story, were a little bit different than the Purple that we had come to know and love, right? Fronted by Ian Gillan. A little more funky and bluesy elements coming into play, but still solid, more than solid actually. Deep Purple, just with a different vocalist. Totally different style. Gillan and Coverdale sound nothing alike. Kind of like Ozzy and Dio. Sound nothing alike. But you know what? Both their vocal styles fit well with the band. So again, another example of how fans, I'm sure they lost some of their core fans, but because Purple arguably were the biggest they ever were during those couple of years when Coverdale and Hughes first joined the band. I mean, that Burn tour was like pretty spectacular, and they toured all over the world. Big concert draw that year, and the album sold extremely well. So again, not the end of the world there. You can go on and talk about all sorts of other bands. So quickly, Iron Maiden, okay? Paul Di'Anno sang on the first couple albums. Now, those albums are great songs. Di'Anno had the perfect voice for that material, but let's be real, folks. Di'Anno can't cut up the mustard compared to Bruce Dickinson. When Dickinson came into the band for Number of the Beast, took things to another level. I still, every now and then, run into people who are like, man, I haven't been able to listen to Maiden since Di'Anno left. Seriously? I mean, come on. There's just no comparison there. And look at what Maiden has done since Dickinson joined the band. Come on, one of the biggest metal bands of the 80s and 90s, and still to this day. I mean, come on. Iron Maiden 2017 are selling out, large venues all across the New York metropolitan area this year. It's still a draw. Dickinson's still firing on all cylinders. Judas Priest, okay? Very first singer, Al Atkins, he left the band before they actually recorded their first album. In comes Mr. Halford, okay? Takes them to, levels. Again, one of the biggest bands in metal, late 70s, throughout the 80s and the 90s. And again, still to this day, Judas Priest, extremely popular. But of course, early 90s, Rob leaves. In comes Tim Ripper Owens. Okay? Most fans completely jump ship at that point. They're like, Judas Priest without Rob Halford, done. Can't happen. And what did you see after that? All of a sudden, Judas Priest are playing clubs. You know, again, Ripper's a great singer. Great singer. Good fit for the band. Was the material on those couple albums they did with him the best? Arguably. Those albums aren't terrible by any means. They're heavy as all hell. They're not terrible, though. But, you know, how many fans just didn't even bother giving them a try? You know? For some of us, you know, hardcore Priest fans, we gave those albums a try. Whether you love them or you don't, okay? I like those albums. I don't love them. They're good. They're different. But, again, I didn't just say, forget it, not going to do it. Right? And then, of course, Halford came back. All is well. Here we are today. Some other, this one always gets me. Okay, so Journey, right? So you had Steve Perry was their classic vocalist. Great singer. One of the all-time best. I mean, they had huge hits, sold-out tours, you know, best-selling albums all throughout the late 70s and most of the 80s, right? So Perry eventually leaves, okay? Couple vocalists come into play, you know, Steve O'Gary, Jeff Scott Soto briefly, and then Arnel Pineda they found about, geez, it's got to be a decade ago, may even be more now. It's been a while. So Arnel is a Filipino singer. He was singing in a Journey tribute band. They found him on YouTube. He's in the band. He's got, you know, again, he's got his own style, but he sounds a lot like Perry, and he can sing all those old tunes. So you kind of have that similar sound. But so many people just refuse to give Journey a chance anymore. They're like, oh, it's not the same without Steve Perry. I miss Steve Perry. Yeah, I've heard the new singer's good, but I just love Steve Perry. We all do, folks. Give it up. Steve Perry is not coming back to Journey. He can't sing anymore. He has no interest in doing it. Arnel is a great freaking singer. Okay? They've even done some new albums of original material with him, and they're very solid. But you know what? The general public ain't buying them. Why? Why can't you give Journey with this great singer, okay, a shot? You know? Or do you know? And then there's people who refuse to go see them live. It's like, oh, Journey's like a tribute band now. What are you kidding me? It's got all the classic members are in there, with the exception of the singer. Seriously, it's like, are you telling me you never want to hear Journey playing those songs again? Are you that attached to Steve Perry that they just can't exist without him? Because let me tell you something, folks. I've seen Journey with both, okay? I've seen him with Steve Perry, magnificent. I've seen him with Arnel, magnificent. They're playing all the same songs. They sound just like you remember him. He's a really good singer. Give him a chance. Buy the albums, for crying out loud. Those couple albums they did with Arnel have some great material on it. It's classic sounding Journey. Perry ain't coming back, you know? Kansas. Okay. Steve Walsh left the band a couple times, right? John Elefante comes in. This is in the early 80s. You know what? They did a couple really good albums with John Elefante. Was he Steve Walsh? No. I mean, Walsh is a superior singer. But John's quite good. You know, it just so happened that Elefante joined the band like right in the mid-80s where, you know, the 80s kind of wishy-washy pop synth stuff was kind of happening. So, you know, Kansas's music got kind of a little watered down around that time. But there's still a lot of really good songs in those albums. And he's a more than capable singer, right? So what happens, you know, of course, Walsh comes back. Stays with the band for quite a long time. Probably too long because his voice kind of ran out on him a long time ago. I love Steve Walsh, but, you know, he was sounding a little rough there for quite a while. So he eventually retired from the band. They got a new Ronnie Platt's in the band now. And he's no Walsh sound-alike by any means. In fact, he probably sounds a little bit more like Elefante. But perfect fit for the band. And he can sing all those great old classic Kansas tunes that Walsh hasn't been able to perform live in a million years. So going to see Kansas now is a real experience. Really is. And if you haven't gone to see them, you should. And their new album is fantastic. So, but again, that's another point. So Kansas releases a new album with their new singer, all new material, and the hardcore Kansas fans got it, are digging it. But, you know, the people who kind of like Kansas, they're like, oh, Kansas has a new album out? I didn't know. No, you know, it's like, whatever. It's like, you know, and it's like they just want to hear Dust in the Wind and Carry On Wayward Son. But that we talked about that last night, so I'm not going to get into that. So again, give Kansas a chance if you haven't. New singer's great. Lynyrd Skynyrd, you know, tragic death, plane crash, you know, so Ronnie's no longer with us. They go into hibernation for a while. Younger brother Johnny eventually steps up to the mantle, takes over. You know what? Johnny's now been fronting the band since the late 80s, folks. It's like, you know, and I know, you know, I mean, there's still a big concert draw. People go see him live. You know, Johnny's great. He is. Perfect voice for the band. But there's a lot of people who are like, oh, Skynyrd are like a tribute band now. It's like, well, you know, I know Gary Rosington is the only original member still in the band. You know, I get it. But you know what? They've had a solid lineup now for a while. You know, Ricky Medlock on guitar. I mean, come on. It's like, you know, the Skinners are still fun. It's like you'd rather never go and see and hear those songs live. Ever. Right? That's what you're telling me? If you refuse to go see Skinner, they're just a tribute band now? I don't know about you, but I still love all those songs, and I'd like to see them played live. And you know what? They got a couple, one original member, the brother of the original singer, and a bunch of guys, and Medlock's got ties to Skinner forever. And, you know, to me, it's not a big deal. Okay? Yeah, we miss Ronnie, but, I mean, he passed away a long time ago. And the band is still putting out records. Good material. I don't know who's buying them, but, you know, again, a lot of people just want to go out and hear the same 10, 15 songs. Whatever. Foreigner, you know, Lou Gramm leaves. Kelly Hansen comes in, does a great job. You go see Foreigner live today, he can sing all those tunes really, really well. And, you know, if you've heard that they did a new album a couple of years back, it's good, solid material. You know, Foreigner didn't end when Lou Gramm left the band, folks. They've been touring and playing for quite a while. Uriah Heep, one of my all-time favorites, you know. So David Byron left the band back in the late 70s. He will always be known as the classic singer of Uriah Heep. I get it. I totally agree with that. But, you know, John Lawton came in, did a hell of a job. Great singer. Did a couple albums with Lawton. Really, really good, you know. And then, you know, Lawton left the band. They had Peter Golby came in on vocals, you know. But, you know, the band as it is today, Heep, still sounding great. You know, got to give them all the credit. Their world didn't end when they changed singers, folks. They're still, and they've got one capable one after another. Alice in Chains, you know, another band. Lane Scully passed away. Band eventually decided to regroup with a new singer. Still solid Alice in Chains, you know. World didn't end, you know. It's like, would you rather never see them again? Okay, I know it's tough without Lane, but the rest of the guys are there. It's like, who else we got here? Nightwish. This is a great one. So, you know, the classic Nightwish era, led by Queen Tarja. Okay, the band had splintered. They had problems with her, or she had problems with them. Whatever. I don't care about the story. You know, most people thought, oh my God, Tarja's gone. Band is done. Dead. So what do? They go out and find Annette Olsen. Okay, kind of a strange choice for Nightwish because she's more of like a pop and rock singer. You know, the fans were pretty brutal with her. I saw them a couple times on that tour, the first tour. But you know what? She did a great job. I mean, granted, because she doesn't sing at all like Tarja, but she did the best she could with the skills she had. She's a damn good singer. They put out a really solid album with her. Okay, it didn't really work. So what did they do? They went out and got Floor Jansen, which is probably the move they should have done to begin with. All right, because Floor Jansen, I think, has basically made everyone forget. Well, maybe not forget, but I don't think anybody's crying that Tarja's not in the band anymore because Floor can kind of do it all, right? And speaking of Tarja, you know, for a singer who's so beloved by so many, she really hasn't done much of anything since she left Nightwish. You know, she's done some solo stuff, but I quite frankly haven't really gotten into much of it. But you really don't hear anybody talking about her anymore. But Nightwish is still riding high and soaring, thanks to Floor Jansen. So, you know, another band. They didn't die, folks. They're arguably better than ever. Who else we got? Or death metal, you know, Morbid Angel. So, you know, classic death metal band. One of the best, legendary. You know, David Vincent will always be thought of as the classic singer for Morbid Angel. But, you know, he left the band a couple times already. Replaced by Steve Tucker. Steve does a great job. Okay, more than fills in. Vincent comes back a few years later. They released that turd of an album a couple years ago that just, you know, nobody really liked. Now he's out again. Tucker's back in. People are like, okay, open arms. Let's do it. Ready for more Morbid Angel. Ready for new material. Ready to get back out on the road. You know, got to keep it going. Iced Earth, Matt Barlow. You know, another one. So many people, when Barlow left that first time, were like, oh my God, Iced Earth is done. Granted, you know, the band did a lot of great albums with Barlow in the vocal slot. And, you know, he's still, you know, you think of Iced Earth, that's what first comes to your mind, is those vocals of his. You know, Ripper Owens came in. He's kind of like what Ripper does, you know, and saved the situation, you know. Saw them live with Ripper a couple times. Man, guys, phenomenal. You know, were the albums that they did with Ripper as good as the ones with Barlow? Yeah, maybe not. You know, I think they kind of got a little too into the whole kind of historical thing, the wars and all that kind of stuff. And you know, John Schaefer's really into that. So for me, those albums aren't as strong. But you know what? You can't really knock Ripper for that because you know, in my mind, he's a better singer than Barlow anyway. You know, and then Ripper leaves, Barlow comes back. That didn't really last too long. It was good to see him back in the band, but you kind of thought that wasn't going to last. And then in comes Stu Block from Into Eternity, and Stu's done a hell of a job. You know, I've caught them with Stu a couple times, and man, he's a perfect singer for the band. So again, you know, I start just continuing on, and there's no end in sight. You know, Anthrax, Joey Belladonna leaves, John Bush enters. You know, John Bush, completely different singer than Joey, right? So when Bush entered the picture, those Anthrax albums are, you know, a bit different, but still really solid. Did some people give up on them then? Yeah, sure. But you know what? You shouldn't have, because they released some strong albums, you know? Eventually, John wound up back in the band. He should have stayed with Armored Saint, because hey, he's the voice of Armored Saint, you know? And Joey's back in Anthrax. Whether you like that or not, I don't know. What else? AC/DC, you know? So yes, those early AC/DC albums with Bon Scott are great. They're legendary. They're raw. But, you know, he passed away, sadly. It's tragic. Brian Johnson came in. I mean, this is one of those examples of, you know, they got bigger after Johnson joined the band. And, but I still talk to people who are like, oh, I still like the Bon Scott days better. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. You know, there's a difference. You know, you listen to those albums, you listen to the ones with Brian Johnson in the 80s and on, they're a bit different. But both great eras, right? Two totally different singers. Both good, though. And judging by the success of AC/DC after Bon passed away, obviously a lot of people stuck with the band, right? And there's probably a lot of people who never listened to the Bon Scott era and only jumped on board for the Brian Johnson years. I'm sure you'll find a lot of those. Genesis. It's another great one here. So, beloved progressive rock band, one of the earliest progressive rock bands, most influential. Peter Gabriel in vocals. You know, Gabriel did this whole theatrical thing with costumes and makeup, and you know, he was just a total character. Maybe not the greatest singer in the world, but he had that unique vocal style, and he'll be forever tied to that early, really progressive Genesis material. So he decides to leave the band after Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and they decide to promote Phil Collins, drummer, to the lead vocal slot. Why? Because Phil's got a great voice, always has. Even the background vocals he sang on the early albums, fantastic. So you know, I think Phil lucked out because I think because he was already a member of the band, the fans kind of gave him a chance, right? And it turned out. You know, you can arguably say that the band's best material was before he took over the vocals, but you know what? You listen to Trick of the Tail, Wind and Wuthering, and Duke. Those are fucking great albums. Really good albums. After that, you know, it's debatable. You know, they went down Pop Avenue and, you know, R&B and all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden, you know, Phil's solo career started mingling with the Genesis material, and, you know, the band completely changed, and, you know, in my opinion, they were never the same. But, you know, again, they were bigger. They became a huge band after Peter Gabriel left. So, you know, who else do I got on my list here? Marillion. You know, I love the Fish era. Okay, Fish leaves, in comes Steve Hogarth. Again, two completely different bands. Hogarth is a great singer, probably a better singer than Fish is. But you know, Fish got that unique style, that commanding presence, the big dude. You know, and then the music of Marillion was so different back then. It was again very Genesis-y. The band has changed significantly since Hogarth took over the vocals. But did they lose a lot of the Fish fans? Certainly. To an extent, they kind of lost me, although I've always followed them. You know what it is? I followed them pretty closely for the first like 10 years after Hogarth joined the band. My issue was never with the vocals. It was always with the material that the band was doing. I have an issue with Marillion's, the way they record their song, or the type of songwriting they do now. To me, it's just so laid back and boring. I just can't get into them anymore. It has nothing to do with Hogarth because he's a great singer. So for me, it's more with the material that they're writing than the actual singer. Yeah, Motley Crue. You know how that worked out. You know, Vince was out, Karabi came in. Pretty solid album, Karabi. Bands just wanted Vince, so Vince was back in the band. I think Karabi's a much, much better singer than Vince Neil will ever be. But, you know, that was a perfect example of people just not willing to give him a chance with a different guy. Had to be Vince, crappy or not. So, you know, whatever. You know, Queen, and this is a kind of a different thing. So Freddie died back in the early 90s, and the band just basically ceased to exist. But, you know, they, in the recent years, you know, they teamed up with Paul Rogers. Pretty cool stuff. And, you know, more recently with Adam Lambert, who is much closer to the style of Freddie. I think, you know, many fans just kind of miss, especially here in this country, if you're about my age. I don't know how many chances you had to see Queen live. I never saw Queen live with Freddie. So, because they didn't tour in the States in forever. And for me, it's like, you know, so you got two original members of the band up there in Roger Taylor and Brian May with a couple other people, and Adam Lambert. I saw them live a couple years ago, and you know what? It's just so cool to see at least some of the members of the band up there playing those classic tunes. I would never had a chance to do that, but there are people. It's like, oh, it's just a Queen tribute band, and well, you know what? Did you get a chance to see Freddie? If you did, then I can see that. But if you never did, never had a chance to see this band, go. It's a lot of fun. Don't just scoff at it. And say, it's a hell of a lot of fun. But you know, again, that's just me. I love live music. I love these classic bands. It's like, and I stick with them through thick and thin in most cases. And if you don't, well, that's your loss. That's all I can say. Anyway, so that is my rant of the day. The world does not end when the lead singer leaves or dies or whatever. So with that, I'll leave you. See you next time. We've got a new edition of What's Hot with Sea Tranquility coming up this week. We're going to talk about new releases from, what do we got? Immolation and Overkill and Sainted Sinners and all sorts of stuff. So we'll see you then. Till then, take care. Be good. See you next time.